me taking my third curtain call at the Alhambra Bradford. Sit! They loved me.
Oh, sorry. I thought this was the party.
This is the party.
Oh.
Right.
Who's for Atari? What's more, it's my party. Music hall's dead, sunshine. Pac-Man, Missile Command, Super Breakout, that's where the action is. All linked up, young man?
Just a moment.
Right, anyone for Haunted House?
You have to be fast on your feet for this,
Oh, don't say that. I want to show you tap dancing next.
Atari. Simply more fun and games.
Hey there, Retro Games fans, this is Andy C from Pieces of 8-Bit. So it is now the end of, well, it's actually now March, in fact, which means that it's time to swap over my consoles for the Month With series. For those of you who watch my channel, you will know that the Month With series, basically, I take a console, I pick a console, and I live with it for a month to see what it's like to play with again and have it alongside my PlayStation 5 and my Xbox and Nintendo Switch and sort of discover what the console was like, kind of reminisce about what it was like to play on that console back in the day if I had one, yeah, let you know what it's been like. You know, is it worth going and checking it out? Sometimes they're the original consoles themselves, and sometimes they are reimagined consoles. And this month's console, or February's console, in fact, was the 2600 Plus, which is a reimagined console. So that is this thing here. And I will talk a little bit about this console. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the 2600 itself, talk a little bit about this unit, and some tips on that. I'll talk also about getting back in with the 2600 game playing, you know, whether it's worth picking up one of these or picking up something else. And I will also talk about the gameplay. So should give you a good all-round view of what it's been like to live with the Atari 2600 Plus, and therefore, by extension, living with the Atari 2600. So without any further delay, let's get stuck straight in. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and the hardware of the Atari 2600 and this device in the next section. So let's get stuck straight in. I'll see you on the other side. Alright, let's talk a little bit about the Atari 2600. So obviously this is the 2600 Plus, which is a reimagined version of the Atari 2600. I'm going to talk a little bit about the console on which this is inspired by, and I'll give you a quick update on what this is like as well. The reason being is because if you buy the 2600 Plus, you're going to be playing 2600 Atari 2600 games. So let's talk a little bit about the hardware of the original console and a little bit about the history. So the original console came out in 1977, so without giving the game away, it's about the same age as me, give or take. Same year as Star Wars. Obviously, this is how long ago it was, so we're talking, what, 48 years ago now. And it originally came out, when it originally came out, it was called the Atari Video Game Console, rather than the Atari 2600. That name came later in 1982. Essentially, it was Atari's way of creating sort of a line of games. So we had the 5200, then the 7800. There was also the 400 and the 800, which were computers as well. So that was sort of the idea of giving it these numbers to sort of create a series of consoles. It was in production for 15 years. It actually didn't finish production until 1992, so quite a long run, really. And the beauty of it is the simplicity of design. So a very, very simple design. Atari's view was really that you provide pretty simple hardware and then let the software speak for itself. Let the software do the work, essentially. It was very affordable, and because of its affordability, Atari actually, although they had a bit of a slow start, they shifted 30 million consoles, which is still one of the best-selling consoles of all time, even by today's standards. So that was up until 2004, that figure, and obviously this version and lots of other clones and everything else have continued to sell additionally on top of that as well. So a very, very important console, really the first sort of very affordable, mass-produced, mass-adopted console. Loads and loads of games and titles, lots and lots of support for it. Yeah, originally if you bought this, you got a pack-in with the infamous game Combat, a really, really cool game with tanks and aeroplanes and things where you kind of two-player shootout, quite cool. Later came packed in with the port of Pac-Man, a game which really wasn't fantastic on the Atari 2600. If you saw my video last week about E.T., I talked briefly about Pac-Man, and it's not a particularly good port, but it came with the console. It was actually, in the end, I suppose, as part of that, the most popular game. Not surprisingly, really. Obviously, Pac-Man was incredibly popular in the arcades. They sold 8 million units of Pac-Man across all of their consoles. So that's basically almost 1 in 3 people who owned an Atari 2600 would have a copy of Pac-Man on it. So obviously a very important game, despite not being a particularly good port. In terms of the life cycle of the machine, it underwent a number of revisions. Most notably in 1986 they released a version called the Atari 2600 Junior, which was very 80s in its design, whilst this is very 70s in its design. That was much more sort of like a colourful rainbow on it and some metal finish on it, very much more in keeping with the sort of electronics of the mid-80s to try and reinvigorate it. It was then superseded by the 5200, which just did not have anything like the sort of success that the 2600 had. We have the 7800, which followed, and one of the good things about the 7800 was that they provided full backward compatibility with the Atari 2600, which was really cool. So if you had an Atari 2600, later on in the 80s you were looking to kind of update and you wanted to stick with Atari, you could buy the 7800 and you could continue to use your cartridges, which was really, really cool. There were a few other minor revisions and other bits and pieces that kind of came out, but those were the main ones. There was, in fact, even in Japan, there was an Atari 2800 which came out, but we only ever saw that in Japan. So loads of titles, really, really cool machine. In terms of the hardware itself, it was based on the MOS Technologies MOS, as you otherwise might know it, 6502. It has an MOS 6507 processor running at 1.19 megahertz, which is pretty low by modern standards. But it was incredibly flexible. It was this really early idea of having microprocessors in a gaming machine, and it made it very cheap and flexible. It came with cartridges, which was still a relatively new thing. We'd only seen that sort of once or twice before. Also added a lot of additional flexibility. Screen resolution of 160 by 192, which was more than adequate for this era, and it came with only 128 bytes of RAM, which sounds remarkably small. The cartridges came with a much more significant 4 kilobytes of RAM, and that was the idea. That a lot of the intelligence was in the cartridges. It's a second generation console. In terms of input, I don't have any of the CX30 paddles with me, but they have the sort of paddles, the dial on the top. You can buy the CX30 paddles for the Reimagined 2600 Plus, but it came with this is the CX40 joystick, which is quite a well-known input device. Just one fire button, and they basically have these. Is it 9-pin? Yeah, 9-pin connectors on them. And this will actually work in a Sega system, apparently. Although don't quote me on that, because I don't want anybody to fry their Sega systems and then blame me for it. Yes, not the greatest joysticks in the world, but pretty good for the time, I suppose. And the nice thing about this particular unit is it will support the original CX40 joystick. So if you've got old 2600 Plus and you've got some of the old joysticks or the old paddles, this device will support them straight out the box as well. You don't need any modifications or anything else like that. I'll talk a little bit about the hardware on there in a moment. So those were the input devices that you had. That was a little bit about the hardware. So pretty low powered, even by sort of NES standards, but perfectly capable of doing the job which it was asked to do. Now this is the 2600 Plus, and this is what I've been living with for the last month. This is a 2023 recreation of the original Atari 2600. It still says on it, I'll just take the cartridge out there, it still says Video Computer System. So it doesn't actually have the Atari 2600 branding on it, but it's called the Atari 2600 Plus, so it's fairly obvious. This is the cartridge that comes with it, in fact, so it's a 10-game cartridge that you get. and on the back of their, oh, help if I held it up the right way, 10 game cartridge, and then on the back you've got these little dip switches which you switch on and off, and those will select the games on the front. So it's kind of cool that it comes with 10 games. And as you can see, this is a standard Atari cartridge, so all of these other cartridges that I've got over here in the background, all of these cartridges will just work, as will the 7800 cartridges. They will just work and plug in with the machine. You can't put any other games on it, so you have to have the cartridges basically. So you can get this one. There is another 4-in-1 cartridge you can buy as well, which will also plug in, which is a modern one, and they have released a lot of cartridges again, modern cartridges, to go in here as well. But yeah, you can just pick up the old ones if you want to. No USB support, so you can't plug in a USB stick like you can on things like on the Spectrum or the Atari, or the Amiga 500 Mini. Yeah, you have to have the cartridges for it, which is fine. So yes, yeah, 80% size recreation. This comes with a Rock Chip 3128 processor, which won't mean a great deal to anyone. Didn't mean a great deal to me, to be honest. 256 megabytes of RAM, so significantly more RAM. And the reason why it's a little bit pokier, I mean, 256 megabytes of RAM in this day and age is still absolutely nothing, but a lot more than 128 bytes. It's about 2,000 times as much if my math is correct. As I say, this also supports 7800, so it needs a little bit more power to be able to support that. And also it runs an emulator, so it is just emulated. And a lot of these reinvented consoles do run emulated software. So this is running what's called the Stellar emulator, which does the 2600, and also the Pro System emulator, which does the 7800 games. It's an Atari device, it's an official Atari device, so there have been some reimagined ones that sort of made under license, or, you know, where it's a bit questionable. And I think the manufacturer's called Planon, I think it is. And like I said, it comes with those 10 bundle games, and it also comes with the CX40 joystick. I have bought another one, and I didn't buy the official CX40 joystick. I actually bought this off eBay. It's a standard CX40 joystick, which will work with the normal 2600, as will the other one that comes bundled with it. But it was just a bit cheaper, so it's not an official one. It hasn't got sort of the gold around the top. Works perfectly fine. Any difference with it really is it's, I don't know if you can hear this, it's clicky. I actually like the micro switch clickiness as opposed to this one, which is, you know, you can. It's sort of a bit less tactile. I actually prefer the cheaper one, as it happens. That's just a personal preference. Other things of note on here then, so you've got the 4 switches. There were times when the I think the original VCS came with 6 switches, which was difficulty for left and right. This does actually have them on the back, so you have got the difficulty switches on the back here. You've also got the black and white switch, which does work. You have your game select and your game reset, so there's no start buttons or anything else like that. You control through the console. And then, as you can see on the back here, you've got your 9-pin connection there, and you've got your HDMI. Where is it? I'm trying to see it right in the middle there. HDMI to your TV, and then you've got a USB-C input power supply, so it's nice and flexible for that as well. So. What else is on the back here? Just the difficulty, and then I can't even see what that says. Literally can't read that. Oh, widescreen mode. So you've got 16:9 or 4:3 on that as well, if you want it. So yeah, cool. It's nice and light. One of the things I really love about this is a little attention to detail. When you switch it on, this little Atari logo lights up on the front, which is really, really cool as well. So there you go. There's a little bit about the actual hardware itself. Cost-wise, varies quite a lot. They were an Amazon exclusive. Typically, you can only buy them on Amazon new, although I've seen them at fairs and other things. Obviously, people have bought them and then sold them on. It's actually, at the moment, cheaper, certainly in the UK, it's cheaper to buy a new one than it is to go and buy a second-hand one at CEX randomly. I've seen them, I paid, I think, £52 is the cheapest I've seen it. I think they're currently about £66. It varies, you know what Amazon's like, it varies quite a lot. But I haven't seen it any more than £70 recently. I would just keep an eye on the price. You can monitor prices for various websites that will monitor prices for you, so you can get a price alert if it drops low. If you're looking to buy one but you don't want to spend a lot of money, you can have a look at that. So there you go. That's the Atari 2600 and the 2600 Plus. A little bit of the history and the hardware there. Let's talk a little bit about the games, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it's been like to live with it. So yeah, let's skip on to the games in the next section. So as I always say in these month with series, the games are the bit that makes or breaks a console. So what have I been playing? What sort of games have I been looking at, and what's it been like to play them? So I've done a review of a few games. So I did a review a couple of weeks ago where I looked at Centipede, Space Invaders, Missile Command, and Pac-Man. And I did a bit of a review of those, so you know that you'll see those playing at the moment as I went through those, a little bit of a recap. But yeah, they were great. I really enjoyed it. I particularly enjoyed Space Invaders and Missile Command. They were fantastic. Centipede is a classic game also, which is really good. And the thing with the Atari 2600 was it really was the home of arcade ports. So if you were a real big fan of the arcades in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, and you wanted to go home and play those games yourself, you'd get yourself an Atari 2600 and you would play those ports. Now, some of the ports are good. I think the Space Invaders port with the limited hardware that it had is actually pretty good. The Pac-Man port is not so good. I have played Ms. Pac-Man as well, which I have looking about around here somewhere. There we go, Ms. Pac-Man. So yeah, been playing Ms. Pac-Man. That game is really, really good. I actually really like that game. That's a really nice port. On the cartridge itself, we've got Adventure, Combat, Dodgem, Haunted House, Maze Cross, Missile Command, Real Sports Volleyball, Surround, Video Pinball, and Yars Revenge. So I have played some of those games. I played Yars Revenge, which I've actually just mentioned before that I've just bought the cartridge for that anyway. So this is trouble. You always want to hold them the other way because the actual pins are on this side, but that's upside down. So yeah, I played Yars Revenge. I have had a go at the old, you can't see it from this, the old Asteroids game, but that's really good. That's a really good version of Asteroids as well. What else? Yeah. California Games. It's just an odd game. It's not a game I like on any platform, to be perfectly honest with you. It's a weird one. Played this on the Commodore 64, I think, back in the day. Yeah, weird game. I'm not. Maybe it's just because I'm rubbish at it, but there's some bits of it I just can't, like, what's going on? I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. Played a bit of that. And yeah, loads of games really. I mean, I played a bit of Combat. Played that with the kids. Played some Indy 500. So I had quite a few gaming sessions on it. In terms of what the games I like to play, then obviously the classics are just the classics, you know, you just love them. But they are very much, all of the games I think very much pick up and play. I think by modern standards they have limited appeal, and that is absolutely no fault of the console and the games at the time. That's just how games were then, right? So, you know, it's not like playing Grand Theft Auto 5. You're never going to find a game that you're just going to go back and play that kind of, put those sort of hours in. They're much more sort of bridging that gap of, hey, you fancy a quick game of something, you stick on the Atari 2600, you play a game for 10 minutes, you might play another game, a different one for 10 minutes, and then you might turn it off. You know, you wouldn't typically find, especially not nowadays, sinking hours, 10s, 20s, 30 hours into any particular game on the 2600. At least I wouldn't anyway. I mean, some of you may do, but it's just not the sort of console really where you would do that. Of course, I have played some other slightly less good games. I mentioned that Pac-Man's not a particularly good port. I also played E.T., which perhaps is a little bit undeserving of its worst game ever made. Then go check my my video out on that one. But it is a really, really terrible game. It's, you know, I'm not going to dress it up. It isn't brilliant by any stretch of the imagination. It's quite frustrating, in fact. So played a lot of games, but I have genuinely really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed going back and playing some of those games again. Yeah, I think probably quite limited appeal if I'm totally honest. And to be honest with you, now I've picked up the Intellivision, which is a slightly newer console from the same generation. I have actually found that the games on the Intellivision have been a bit better. I've enjoyed those a little bit more. I just found them that they just, whether it's just the timing of it, or whether it's just the way that the console's built, or the way the games are built, I actually enjoyed the games on the Intellivision a little bit more than I have on the 2600. But don't get me wrong, I have really enjoyed playing some of those games on the 2600. And it's been great even to go and look at things like ET and just go and give it another look, have another play, make up my own mind about what I think about it. So that was the games. The nice thing about picking up games for the 2600 is that the cartridges are not that expensive and they are incredibly robust. When you consider that some of these games are the same age as the console, well, not that one console, but the original console, you know, some of them are, you know, 48, 47 years old, and the cartridges mostly just needed a bit of a clean, and some of them, as you saw, you know, some of the stickers on them now are really starting to look really quite faded and a bit grubby, but they are still, you know, like they all still work. It's incredibly robust. It's testament to just how good quality the hardware was back in the day. So quite easy to get hold of the games if you get yourself 2600. Plus, then obviously it's quite a good way of getting into that without spending loads of money on new reinvented cartridges. So before I tell you a little bit more about what it's been like to live with, I am just going to quickly in the next section talk to you a little bit about how you can get yourself into the Atari 2600 space and get playing on Atari 2600 games again. So let's have a quick talk about that, and then I'll tell you what I thought about the whole experience. So just very quickly in this section, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can get yourself back into Atari 2600 gaming, or Atari 7800 gaming if you're interested in that as well. So there are a few ways, and most of the time I do these month with series, the answers are pretty much always the same. There are lots of options for Atari 2600. So obviously we have the 2600 Plus. Now that's the option that I'm going to suggest that you go out and get. If you're happy, if you've got the space to store a console, this is just a really lovely unit. It's really well built, and it's just nice and easy. And as I mentioned before, getting you come with 10 real classic games, but obviously you can go out and find the cartridges also pretty cheaply. The limitation for this, as I mentioned before, is that it will only play the cartridges. So if you want to play other Atari games and you can't find the cartridges, then this might not be for you. But if you get yourself down to a gaming fair, so I was at the Black Country Gaming Fair, quite a few people selling 2600 games. I almost picked up a pristine copy of ET as well, just because it looked quite collectible, and then decided against it. It was only £30. But decided against it because I haven't got the space for it anyway, and I'm trying not to fall into the trap of collecting too many games, especially ones that I have absolutely no intention of ever playing again. But you can find a lot of games. There are some really unusual ones as well. I was chatting to one of the guys there, and he was telling me about the artwork on the 2600 games. Like, you just don't see it anymore. But there was some random ones in, like Learn How to Program Basic. There was a cartridge there for that. There was a maths quiz one. So there's quite a lot of sort of random stuff you can find. So you can get hold of the cartridges. But like I say, if there's a cartridge that you particularly want, or it's stupidly expensive and you can't get hold of it, this might not be the system for you. If you've already got a load of 2600 cartridges or 7800 cartridges, but you haven't got a working machine, this is definitely the one thing you want to go for. But there are other systems out there. There are a lot of recreated Atari 2600 systems. There's an Atari VCS one. I've seen some others that come with hundreds of games on them. So that is not the only recreation console that you can get. And in fact, this here, so this is by Blaze actually, who do the Evercade systems. This is an Atari style joystick. Obviously, you can see it's got a lot more buttons on it. And this, I don't know if you can still get the games for this now, but the idea is that you plug this into your PC, and it actually came with a whole bunch of games. I don't know if they're built in or whether you have to download them. I never actually did it. I just used this as a joystick, but that was one option. There's a few options out there like that. And of course, the other option, which is one that I always talk about, is the emulation option. So the emulation for Atari 2600 is typically the Stellar emulator. That is the emulator that you will generally find. There are other emulators out there, but the Stellar emulator, it's what's in here. It's what you'll typically find on things like Launchbox or on RetroPie. Those are the that's the emulator for that. The other one is Pro System, which is the 7800 one, and again, that's the sort of de facto standard for 7800 emulation. Obviously, a couple of ways you can do it. I mentioned Launchbox there. You've got OpenEMU on the Mac, which is a really good system, very, very similar to Launchbox, but open and free, which is kind of cool. And then you've also got your RetroPie build. So I have just over here, if I just show you this. This is getting very delicate now. This is the last time I'm going to get this out. So this is the Lego build that I did a while ago with the sort of pop-up thing in there. This has actually in the back, I have got a Raspberry Pi Zero in there, and that's in fact that's what I use this joystick for. So that plugs into the back of there, and I actually have a RetroPie build on there with the Atari 2600 games on that, so I can play it on this. So this is actually a Lego build, but it's actually a working system, which is kind of fun. Go check out my Lego review of that. It's quite an old one, so I apologise for the video editing being a little bit ropey back then. But so that's one way of doing it. Obviously, I've got running in the background here. You can just see I've got Centipede, and that is running on a Raspberry Pi 4 as well. So that's another good option. So there's lots of good options for emulation, lots of recreated systems out there. So there are loads of ways of getting back into the 2600. So let's finish there on that note for that section, and then let's just go and talk about what it's been like to live with the 2600 and whether I recommend you go out and get one. See you on the other side. So, what has it been like to live with the 2600 Plus for the month of February? I've enjoyed it. I have genuinely enjoyed it, but I have also realised the limitations of such an old system. So obviously this is a 2023 system, but it is based on a system that is obviously significantly older than that. So, it's the limitations of this device, as I mentioned before, is that it only has cartridge support. I would have liked to have seen, a little USB port in the back that you could have plugged in some additional games, but I get it, it's fine, and as an authentic experience, this is really good. The 2600 itself had some limitations, and this machine comes with some of those limitations. Obviously, we don't have the limitations of a video out anymore. We're HDMI, which is great, so I can plug it into my TV, but you'll notice that the ports for the joysticks are on the back. That's something I never thought was a good idea on any console. Obviously on the Intellivision and Capacitor at the time, they're sort of hardwired in and they sit on the top, but having them behind obviously immediately limits, it puts quite a bit of pressure on the connection, and it means that the sort of, unless you have it backwards, but then it looks rubbish, you kind of, it's not a great setup. The cartridges are all well and good, but like I say, you are obviously limited to those as well. In terms of gameplay, I've really enjoyed getting back and playing some of the 2600 games again, and it has been enjoyable to do it. Having said that, I think for me now, I think these games are really, really showing their age. Now they are important games because they are so iconic, and things like Space Invaders and stuff. I would go and play the arcade version of that ahead of playing the 2600 version of it anyway. But some of the other games on there now, which are are classic games, things like Adventure, really very limited appeal. I found some of the mechanics of the games quite frustrating. And again, that's completely understandable because of the age of the console and the age of the software and all of those kind of things and the limitations of the hardware. Totally get all of that. But let's be realistic here. That's all well and good saying, yes, those games are great to look back on. But are you, hand on heart, really going to go and play those games all the time? For me, the answer is no. It might not be no for you. You may enjoy going back and playing these games more than some of the more modern games. For me, it really wasn't until the NES and the Master System where gaming got really interesting, and I really like playing. That said, I have enjoyed playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons on the Intellivision. I think that will probably also have limited appeal to some degree, but it's not. I think it's really not until sort of the early mid-80s when you started to see games that had that really long-term appeal. And I think the games on here now really are showing their age. And I think if you show them to the kids who just haven't got that nostalgia, they look at that and go, well, this is kind of boring, or I don't see the point of this. And you know, me and my son, we had a couple of, you know, we had a go on the Indy 500, and he was quite frustrated by it, but I think he enjoyed it for a short time. But really, I think if I'm honest, this is for me a novelty device. This is not a console. I have so many consoles that I get out all the time. This won't be a first for me. This will be something that I get out as a showpiece from time to time, just to kind of show people what it was like back in the olden days when I was, well, when I was a baby, to be perfectly honest. I wasn't playing, I don't have a lot of the nostalgia, I suppose, myself, really, because I wasn't playing these games until some years later. So there you go. That was the Atari 2600. Should you go get one? If you love that era and you have nostalgia for it, definitely suggest going and getting one. The cartridges are cheap. It's good to play. I would just caution against looking at it through rose-tinted glasses a little bit too much. If you haven't played an Atari 2600 game for some time, or never at all, you might find yourself a little bit disappointed. But as a piece of hardware, it's really, really good. I love the attention to detail. I love the authenticity of it. I love being able to play the old cartridges on it. But in reality, for me, it's probably more a novelty than a serious console that I'm going to revisit a lot. So there you go. So that was my month with. So next month is going to be, and here we go, drum roll. I will be playing on the original Xbox. So I'm going to put the original Xbox back in my living room, and I'm going to play on it. And I never owned an original Xbox. For those of you who know me, I'm very much a PlayStation person. And so the original Xbox is something that I have very little experience of. A bit like the Master System, it's going to be a bit of a learning experience for me. I am actually super excited about this because I really enjoyed Project Gotham Racing when I had a go at it. I did quite enjoy Halo as well, which is a game I thought I would never like. And I've got quite a lot of titles on the original Xbox to play, and I just haven't given it the time of day. So that's going to be going in the living room, and obviously at the end of March, I will talk to you a little bit about that. So yes, that obviously is coming up through the next month. Yeah, I think I could probably leave it there for the day, to be honest with you. I probably don't want to talk too much more about what's coming up, mainly because I haven't really thought about it beyond the Xbox, actually. So going to be packing this Atari 2600 away, going to be getting all the bits and pieces out and all the peripherals, and my analog to digital converter, which I'll need for the Xbox, and popping that into the living room, and I'll be super excited to get started with that. So yes, I think that's probably it for today. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you found that useful. If you do enjoy these videos, please do hit that like and subscribe button. I do really appreciate it. And that probably just leaves me to say, until the next time, please do take care of yourselves. I'll see you around. Bye for now.